Okay, in this video we're going to look at how you graph a linear equation. So we've kind of been talking about different forms that your equations can be in. So if we first look at how an equation can be written, in order to graph it, we want it to be in what's called slope-intercept form. And we've kind of talked about this a little bit, but here's what it looks like. It will always start with y equals, and you will have the rest of it be in the form of mx plus b. And that m will stand for something, and it will be a number, and the b also stands for something, and it'll also be a number. So really the only letters that you'll see in the equation are the x and the y. So the m will always represent your slope. And that's how steep the line is going to be. And that's always the number that is in front of the x. The coefficient with the x is always the slope. The b always stands for the y-intercept. And that is where your graph is going to cross the y-axis. So if you have the coordinate plane like this, remember your y-axis is the vertical. So if I had this line right here, that line crosses the y-axis at that point right there. So that would be your y-intercept. So let's look at the equation y equals 4x minus 3. And right now I want to look at just picking out what the slope is and what the y-intercept is. So remember, your slope is the m. That's the number that is directly in front of the x. So I look in this equation. What number is directly in front of the x? And that is the 4. So your slope is 4. And your y-intercept is that other number that tags on to the end. So your y-intercept in this instance is going to be a negative 3. And it's negative because the problem has the minus 3, has the negative sign in front of it. Now if we look at something like y equals 5 over 3x plus 17. Again, we're going to pick out the slope and the y-intercept. So your slope, which is represented with the m, is the number directly in front of the x. So in this instance, that is 5/3. And your y-intercept is that other number hanging out there. In this case, it's going to be a positive 17 since it says plus 17. So now we're going to use those to be able to graph these on the coordinate plane. So we have a couple of steps that we're going to follow. I'm going to write those down really quick here. So the first one, whenever you are going to graph these, step number 1 is you're going to plot your y-intercept, and remember that was the other number that was just kind of hanging out there by itself in the equation. You're going to plot that on the y-axis. Just go to that number and put a point. Second thing is you're going to use your slope. And if you remember, we've talked about the slope. You have to do what's called rise over run. The slope basically gives you directions of how to get to the next point. You're going to rise so many, you're going to run so many. So we're going to use that to get to the next point. So we're going to do a few examples here. And we're actually going to graph the equations that are listed as examples here. So moving on, example number 1, we have y equals 3x minus 4. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pick out my slope, and I'm going to pick out my y-intercept. So remember, your slope is the number that is directly in front of the x, and that right here is a positive 3. And your y-intercept is that other number. Now notice it says minus 4, so that's going to make it a negative 4. Now, first thing I plot is the negative 4, so I'm going to come down 4, and I'm going to put a dot right there. And then the second step said to use your slope which is rise over run, to get to your next point. Now my slope is 3. You always want your slope to be written as a fraction because of the rise over run. So I can rewrite the number 3 as 3 over 1. So that's going to tell me I am going to rise 3 and then I'm going to run 1 to get to my next point. So from here, I'm going to rise 3, 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to run 1. So right there is my second point. And then last thing I need to do is connect these points with a line, and then there you have it. There's your graph. Okay, moving on to the next one. Here we have the equation y equals -3/4 x plus 3. And I know some of you would rather see it written like this with that fraction straight up and down, so I'll do that to help you guys. So first thing, let's pick out our slope and our y-intercept. So your slope, the number right in front of the x, is -3/4. Your y-intercept is that other number. So it says plus 3. It's going to be a positive 3. So whenever I go to graph this, first thing I need to plot is my y-intercept. So remember, that's your b. So since that's a positive 3, I'm going to come straight up here to 3 and put a dot. Then from there I use my slope, and my slope gives me directions as to where to go. So from the point I just plotted, my slope is -3/4. So we need to rise -3, which means I need to come down 3, and then I'm going to run a positive 4, so I'm going to come to the right 4. That's where my next point would be. So I have my 2 points. I'll go ahead and connect those, and then there's your line. Okay, next example. We have the equation y equals x minus 1. So again, let's pick out our slope and our y-intercept. Our slope is the number that's directly in front of the x. Now, there is no number right here, and we know that when there's no number in front of an x, technically it's a 1. So your slope is 1. And your y-intercept, since it says -1, my y-intercept will be -1. So on my graph, first thing I need to plot is the y-intercept. That was -1, so I'm going to come down to -1. And my slope was 1, so I can rewrite that as 1 over 1. So from here, I'm going to rise 1, and I'm going to run 1. And there's my next point. So connect those, and we're done with that line. Okay, and we're going to look at one more example here. We have y equals 5x minus 3. So again, let's pick out our slope and y-intercept. So my slope is 5, and I'll go ahead and write that as 5 over 1 because I know I'll need the fraction part of it. And then the y-intercept is -3. I'll go ahead and get my hash marks in here. Okay, first thing I need to plot is the y-intercept. So I know that that is -3, so I'm going to come down here to -3 and put a dot. And then my slope is 5 over 1, so I'm going to rise 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm going to run 1. And that tells me right where that second point should be. I'll connect those, and then don't forget your arrows. And there's your line for that one.